Hello, this is R Rats with Team 4545 League, analyzing the game between DS Chess Q and Monkey Shark. This was played in team event number 53 in round 1 of the playoffs. And before I show this game, I just wanted to show an opening, and there's a reason for it. You'll see. Okay. The Bengal Gambit, we've all seen that. This is an interesting way to decline it, and the best move for black is to take on c4, but I've seen people play b4, and then it basically becomes a struggle where white tries to run his pawns on the king side. And just to give you a sample idea, white's going to play knight d2, and then we'll just kind of play it normal Benko style, e4, g6, and then knight f3. Maybe not knight. He might try f4. I just want to get f4 in and illustrate my point of some of the strategies in this, should you ever run into it. And whoops, it's black's move. Let's put the bishop. Let's just pin the knight so we get freer development. We're going to give up this bishop for the knight if it comes down to it. Well, essentially, this is the position I wanted to show. White's going to try for an e5 break at some point. He's not ready for it now, and it's an interesting position. White's got a little bit more board room. That's about it. And if black exchanges on c4, the game still tends to follow the same type of pattern, or it can. Okay, and there's a reason for it, as you'll see. Okay. So we're almost in a Benko Gambit reversed. It sure looks like it. For instance, black could play c5 here, and you see this is an option, as well as taking on c5, and it could follow the strategies that I've seen just shown with colors reversed. But this didn't happen exactly yet. We'll see. Okay, so f6, and I was pointing out in the other line that eventually the pawn will be on f5 to support an eventual e4 push, but black's playing it just a little bit differently. And e3 is kind of Blumenfeld counter gambit, colors reversed, should the black pawn get up to c5. So it's a little different than Benko, but some of the concepts still exist. Now, I don't understand queen a4 check. It just doesn't smell right, so to speak. What do I always preach? What I always say every game when somebody doesn't do what? Develop. Development. If your pieces aren't out, you're not going to do anything. Okay? And a one-piece attack, well, you got this knight out, but where's it going? A one-piece attack just isn't going to bear any fruit. So, you're trying to guard this pawn, or you're going to gambit. Is that the idea? Well, if you want to guard the pawn, just play a3. Okay? Or play queen b3. Queen b3 at least holds on to the pawn for now, and it puts the queen on a diagonal that black may be castling into. So I just don't quite understand queen a4 check, but that's what he played. We'll go with it. It's not a losing move by any means, by any stretch of the imagination, but now black's able to develop with the tempo. Now the queen has to move. Actually, it doesn't, but white goes ahead and pushes b5. So here's white with all this pawn activity, but where's his piece activity? Well, it's not there. And his king is actually starting to get a wee bit exposed here, and we'll see why in a moment. Okay, so queen e7, or check, and now white's in kind of in a quandary. He has to move the king because bishop e2 allows d3. Okay, now this didn't have to happen. That white had to lose castling privileges, but he just moves the king. And if I'm black, I'm quite happy here. I have at least an equal game. The white king can't castle, so the rooks aren't going to get connected right away. What I want to do now is develop my pieces and as quickly as possible, and go from there. So let's see what happens. So c5. Now we're starting to take the position that I started out with. It's kind of like what I showed earlier. There's some differences, but sometimes if we're familiar with other positions, we can apply some of the logic from those to what's sitting here in front of us. Okay, the queen side is now locked up, and so that means unless one side finds a way to break open the queen side, that the game is going to be decided in the center or on the king side. So what white needs to think about now is getting his king to safety, castling by hand. He's also has to get the rest of his pieces developed, and he could start with bishop d3. It has an annoying threat of rook e1, okay, and black's going to have to stop and deal with that. Let's see what he does. He does play bishop d3. Okay, this is the threat that white has to deal with, or black has to deal with. So he does it by moving the queen. Now this clears e7 so that a minor piece can come there. Now this knight on g8 can go to h6 to get developed. White's certainly not able to trade it off because his bishop is cut in, and the knight can redeploy to f7 and at any moment where it's headed for more influence in the center. It could even go to f5. But what black needs to do is get castled here, and white needs to complete his development, and right now it's not happening. So I'm not so sure about the check. I mean, what this does is it does develop the rook, and that's what I'm calling for, but it basically tells black, go ahead and develop. Do what you need to do here. So I think the best move here is probably bishop e7, just looking at it. That's the first move I would play. And then my follow-up, as I said, would be knight h6, and then I'll castle. If you play knight e7, that's acceptable too, but now your knight's pinned, and your bishop can't move, so you have to stop and play g6 to get it developed. And then go there it is. Black plays knight e7. How much time did he spend on it? Well, he lost 1 second, so he spent his increment plus a second. And let me just give a sample line, what I call my fantasy chess. Let's just see, play bishop e7. Okay, what's white going to do? Well, he's got to get developed, right? He certainly is not attacking anywhere. And the only way he's going to get developed is if he redeploys his pieces on the queen side and get him over to the king side, and then get his king shuffled into safety. So one idea, interestingly enough, is bishop f1. The purpose of this is that we want to develop this bishop on this diagonal if we can, although it's not clear what squares we have just yet. But let's just look at bishop f1. Now I'm saying knight h6. Now d3 will just threaten to mess up the pawns, which may not be bad. So knight f7. Now where does the bishop develop? Well, that's the best square for it, so we got to prepare for it. Okay, and then black castles, and so we don't want to put the bishop on d2 because that takes away a square for a knight. Now the queen's in trouble. It's got to run. Okay, I think this is the only square. Okay, and now white goes about his business with knight d2. Now this guy's got to get developed. Where's it going to go? Everything's covered. So maybe go pin that knight, and then white plays king c2. He could even play bishop g2, and look at this. White's got his development up. He's catching up. The rooks are connected. The king's reasonably safe, and it's now time for black to come up with a new course of action. Now this not necessarily is the best play. It's just a sample idea. I see some strategies black could employ here. Going back into this position, he could be playing a6, working on a pin. But then again, the a6 pawn is pinned because the rook's loose and the knight's not out where it needs to be. So it's extremely double-edged. But so bishop f1, I think, is a good alternative. After knight e7, the alternative is you let it sit there, and what's your follow-up? Well, it means your bishop has to go to b2, and your knight has to go to a3, and then what's their future? It really isn't one. Let's just look at a sample line there. Bishop g7, or bishop e2, G6, knight A3, bishop G7, now knight C2, castles. Now the rook's in the way of the knight. The knight gets to E1. Then the king can come up to C2 and connect the rooks. So bishop F1 appears to be superior to going about this line of action, and it's one of those moves that people look at and they won't consider. They say, no, you don't make a move like that because it undevelops your piece. But White's got himself all congested here on the queen side, and it's the only logical move, really. And what else can I say? Okay, let's go on with the game. Knight A3, and then Black goes about his method here. Now again, White has this problem of getting his queen side developed, as I just explained in that other fantasy line, and Black's going about his business getting his guys developed. And I think it's at this point that White just panics. This is not a bad move necessarily, but the follow-up is what's not good. Okay, this is taking advantage of a pin, but Black finds his own pin. He plays F5, and like I say, at this point, White really panics. He has some reasonable play here. He doesn't have to. He doesn't have to fall for a lot of stuff here. There's probably a lot of variations. I'll just cover one. One interesting line is just play knight B3. Now the point is, if bishop takes A1, and you take back the knight, White's getting a lot of activity here for his sacrifice. Okay, it's true Black can go give a check, but White has some resources here, and he's got potential attacks on the long diagonal. It's tricky, it's complicated, and there's more to it than just what I showed. But in light of what White played, he just gave up the piece. It just seems that there's more here than meets the eye. And how much time did White spend on that move? Well, he spent about 2 minutes on it. So at the moment he's got a 10-minute advantage on his opponent on the clock. So when you have a 10-minute advantage against your opponent on the clock, and all of a sudden the position just got complicated, spend those 10 minutes. Spend 20 if you have to. Now he's got a 10-minute advantage. If you spend 20, unless he's going to play blitz, he's probably going to wonder what you were looking at and spend at least 5, and you'll only be behind 5 minutes. You've got time, use it. How many times do I have to say this? Use your time. And there's times that you're going to need to stop and take your time. Okay, so White grabs this pawn, and there's some other ideas behind this knight B3. Let's see. Get back one more. I just wanted to mention one other line. Oh, wait. Okay, knight takes F5. One other idea behind knight B3 is suddenly this bishop is threatening to get in the game, and this way, I was giving up the exchange and having the rook takes on E7. Well, now there's even more pressure on E7. Yeah, I know D3 hangs, but surprisingly, White has resources here, and I could spend 20 minutes showing you every single thing, and that's not the purpose. The purpose is that I set this thing up, and the players that played this game take it back to the drawing board and sit down and work on things and analyze and satisfy themselves, because maybe they wouldn't consider some of these ideas. So I can just explain it. The way I teach chess is that you teach yourself, but I'll teach you how to teach yourself. And the way you teach yourself is by dissecting these positions and looking and trying to satisfy yourself what's actually happening here. And there's definitely a lot of work to be had from both sides to analyze this game. And the net result of putting in all this work is that you sharpen your tactics, you sharpen your calculation ability, you discover your strengths, you discover your weaknesses, and then next time you play a game, you're a little better prepared, and that's the way to improve. Okay, So let's go back to the game and see what happens. So now black has got a little material advantage. White's got a pawn or two for it, but for white after 15 moves to be in this position where he had to give up a piece and he's got another one loose, it just doesn't smell right. Okay. And now he gets this pawn, and there's some pressure down here, but black has well, he doesn't get that pawn. I'm a little confused here, sorry. Okay. So for the moment black is up two pieces, but white's got some activity here, and white's got three pawns for it. That's really not enough. Black should be winning this, but let's see what happens. Okay, knight g6. So now if you're playing black, you've got to be happy with your position here, because like I say, you've got three pieces. White's got a whole bunch of pawns, and that's all he has. And white's not really coordinated to generate any kind of activity here. So at least black is taking his time and just goes on. Now, does he need to grab that pawn? Okay, it's nice to have the material count a little bit better, but here's a couple guys here that are begging to get in the game. So how do we go about getting them in the game? Well, what's white threatening? I'd like to play bishop e8, but then knight e6 comes in, forking, and we're giving back some wood. Where else can the bishop go? Go back to c8. So white has some activity here for the extra piece he sacrificed, but anyway, queen takes f2. Sometimes we can just keep collecting pawns and then re-coordinate. But I always want to, when you snatch a pawn, I always want to stop and look and say, could you have just made a developing move that would have left your or strengthen your position in some other way that would have just left your position overwhelming, and let those pawns fall 5 moves from now or 20 moves from now or whatever. There's no rush. And now I think this helps black a little bit, because it's going to clear d7 for his knight, and black should be exchanging there. He does. So what else did white have? Well, as I was saying, if he doesn't do anything, all these pawns are going to fall. So how do you stop that? Well, you can stop it with bishop f1. That was the move I suggested earlier. Now d2 looks inviting. If I can get another attacker on that, I can checkmate my opponent. But you see, this bishop's in the way. This knight can't get developed right now, and we can play bishop e8, I suppose. Looks like we can get away with it now. There's no fork, but there could be some tricks in here. You know, now knight to c7. Now the rook's under attack. The bishop's under attack twice. So I think it was better for white just to leave the knight there. He's helping black out. How much time did he spend on it? Let's see. We gotta get the main line. Okay. He 16, 28. He spent just over a minute on it. That's not enough time, especially when you have a 15-minute advantage on the clock. Okay. So you don't want to make, as I've said many times in these videos, you don't want to make moves that help your opponent develop. This is something Aaron Nimzovich preached, and I think most of us are familiar with him. His book, My System. It's classic. It's one of those books that's going to keep selling, and as long as chess is played. He's got it all down. If you haven't read it, read it. Don't make moves that develop your opponent's pieces. And this just lets black do exactly what he wants. Get that queenside developed. Okay, so now I guess black should be playing knight d7 here, and he didn't. He sees more material. Oh, okay. What am I missing? Okay, sometimes these. Okay, I didn't play the game. Sometimes there's more stuff in here than meets the eye. But as I've said in my series, a developing move is rarely the wrong choice. Okay, it's rarely the wrong choice. So it does have a threat. Let's burn a move for white. Let's play a bad move. Okay, what's white do against knight c5? Now you've got the knight fork that you took in one move instead of threatening a knight fork. What's white do? He can't give up his queen. If he counterattacks the white queen with rook e2, black just plays queen takes e2 check as a Zwischenzug and then grabs the other queen. So knight d7 is an immediate threat. White has to handle it. He'd like to do something on this diagonal, but it's not clear how he uses it. Because even if the queen goes to b3, the knight still comes to c5. So how does white stop knight c5? Well, I guess his only move doesn't even stop it. c5 doesn't stop it. The queen's on it. You just take it anyway. Now, white gets this. Now he's set up on the long diagonal or the a2 g8 diagonal. But so what? You take the rook, and now black is ahead. A rook and a knight. What was wrong with that? So white had no recourse. What can white do? He's got to avoid knight c5 check. Not check, but he's got to avoid knight c5. So he's got to get the queen and rook out of danger. So let's try rook e2. That tempos the queen. Well, what's black going to do? Well, hey, let's put the queen on d4. Let's threaten to take that bishop. What's wrong with that? I don't see anything wrong with it. What's the bishop do? It's going to have to run, right? Or guard it. Want to guard it? Well, look, knight c5. Now I'm putting more pressure on it. And then, not to mention the fact this queen has all kinds of potential discoveries, attacking, opening up a diagonal on this rook. I mean, this is deadly. The black position is swarming. I don't see what white does against knight d2 or knight d7. What does he do? That's the only logical move, and then this just seems to lead to trouble. So let's, instead of guarding it, let's bring it back. Okay, I'm still bringing the knight into play. Okay, I'm going to attack that queen. Now I'm going to bring the other knight into play. Now I'm going to plunk a knight in on d3 and suffocate you. That will trap the rook on c1. Game over. Black's just dominating. So, you know, we're quick to make exchanging moves sometimes, but the net result after all this is said and done is the knight's still stuck on b8 and the rook is stuck on a8. And there's some bitter irony coming up here. You'll see later. Okay, knight f4. Okay, and it's a good move. It's not a bad move. I can't. It's just that there was a much better move on the board, and you don't want to keep your opponent in the game. The more chances you give him, the longer he's hanging around, the more chances you have to go wrong. Okay, so knight f4, and then white happily trades. You know, he's just playing attrition. If I trade rooks and queens, I'm up 2 pieces, and I'll win the ending. Well, it's not that easy. You've got to work to get them off, and the best way to make exchanges is for your pieces to be actively posted, so that if your opponent doesn't exchange, worse things happen. And the only way you're going to have active pieces is if you develop. And those guys are still sitting there. Usually I talk about the rook and the bishop on those squares. Now the knight's the culprit. It's rare, but you can't leave your army behind or you're going to lose any fight. And there's no need to grab another pawn. You're 2 pieces up. Develop. Well, you can't develop now. See, you can't develop now, but there's still no need to grab the other pawn. We've got to get developed. How do we get developed? Okay, how do we get developed? Well, we're going to have to re-coordinate a little bit. That exchange cost us some, but white's only. Let's just play. Do we want to play queen c5? Rook d5 comes in. Maybe taking the pawn is the best choice. You know, black's messed things up, so he can't develop that knight. Maybe, and you know, queen b6 with the idea of rook d8 runs into c5. Then we can play queen f6. Now we're planning to play rook d8, or we could play queen e6. so that we're threatening to play knight d7, finally threatening to develop our piece. You know, that's kind of sad when you're threatening to develop a piece. Something's wrong with your game when you're threatening to develop. Okay, so, okay, maybe taking the pawns, okay, but it still doesn't solve that issue. Let's see what happens next. Oh, by the way, this also opened up a file for white to attack on. White's got a glimmer of hope. So instead of losing a pawn, he just throws it to the wind. Maybe white should have let black take it, since black's happily munching pawns, and just play c5. Heck, if we're lucky, maybe we'll be able to make a queen with that pawn majority. Who knows? I'm not going to analyze this out, but h4. Yep, there's black looking for pawns. Hey, give me your pawns. Hi, I'm Mr. Knight on b8, and I need to be developed. You know, it's crazy. You know, black could almost just sacrifice the piece just to get developed, and he'll still be winning. Okay, let's try this. Knight c6. Okay, bang. I'm take back with my queen. Now, your queen trade's gone. I mean, if you make the queen trade, you're lost. And if you don't make the queen trade, I've destroyed your pawn majority, and I'm still a piece ahead, and my rooks are connected, and I'm going to start offering rook trades next. So what do you think of that? Okay, look at that. Boom, development. Black's still winning. White's got some potential on the G file, but at least his pieces are out. You know, the way he was playing it, his pieces were suffocating. Okay, let's get to the main line, see what happened. Okay, check. Okay, nothing wrong with the check. Now I want to pin that guy. Then I've got a threat. That's the first thing that I see. I want to pin. What does white do against the pin? Let's see what white played. He took a pawn. Or black played. He took a pawn. Oh my goodness. Those pawns aren't going anywhere. They'll fall later. Pin. Okay, what are you going to do? What are you going to do if you're white? Let's think about it. What are you going to do? You can try queen b3. Okay. Well, surprise. Now it's pinned. Now you got a spite check. It's just spite check because that's all it is. Nothing else. King h8. Now, what's white going to do? White has no good move. Okay, let's just play a good move. If you want to call it a good move. Well, looky. Queen takes rook. Queen takes. Rook takes. King takes. And now we're two pieces up, and we get our knight developed. Hooray! And all those pawns are going to fall in time. Black was just hunting pawns instead of using his pieces. So every time he takes a pawn, white's got another glimmer of hope. Okay, queen takes, but black's still winning. It's just that it's getting trickier. Okay, queen b3, might as well threaten a check, and he allows it. But at least now, black's getting ready to develop his knight, and white says not yet. Now he breaks the discovered check. That's fine. And now white wants to come down to the 7th rank. Now, all of a sudden, white's got threats. Now, why does white have threats? Because black ate about 2 or 3 pawns on the king side. That's why. He's still 2 pieces ahead, but black's got threats. How do we deal with them? Well, we don't want that rook coming into the 7th rank, so if I'm black, I'm going to play bishop f6. Yeah, that opens up things here, but I should be okay. Let's see what he played. Yeah, he did. Good. Okay. Bishop f6 keeps the rook out. Now white runs over there. Now, perfect time. Knight d7. I don't see what white has. He gets a spite check or 2, and that's about it. Knight d7. Does he play it? Before I check, let's see if there's any more pawns that black can snatch. Nope, he didn't play it. There's no need to take away that check from white. There's no need. Just develop. Okay, let me give the check. What are you going to do? You're going to go over here. Fine. Okay. Look. Now, if white gives up his rooks for the queen, black has 2 rooks, a bishop, and a knight for the queen in compensation. A rook, bishop, and knight are enough to beat a queen, but now you've got an extra rook thrown in. So let white do that. Give up the queen. Knight c5. That knight has got a wonderful outpost. Okay, let's just look at it. Rook takes, and then we give it check. Oops, not yet. I have to take here. Check. Now, white may have a nuisance check or two, but that's about it. He can grab this pawn, but I'm sorry, black is winning this game. White has no hope. A queen is no match, as I said, for a rook, bishop, and knight, and here black has an extra rook. So now the black rook on a8 will get developed, and game over. Okay. I'll let the players look at this on their own. Okay, so there was no need to take away the check, but you know what? Black's still winning. And he does it anyway. He goes after this. And finally, it's developed. How long did it take? That knight could have been on c5 right now, attacking the queen. But it's not. It's sitting on d7. Now white finds something else to attack. He'll attack the bishop. And white went bonkers here, or black went bonkers. But he's running low on time. And why is he running low on time? Let me just back up. Where did his time go? Okay, he spent 10 minutes on bishop d4 and I solved it in seconds because it was a move I've been suggesting for the last 5-10 moves. Get that knight developed. Okay? So there was no need to have to spend 10 minutes on this move. White has nothing here. The best he can do, as I said, is trade his 2 rooks for the queen. And he has no hope. Just knight d7. So, bishop here. And now black gives up the piece. What's he got for it? Well, he's got a queen trade. That was what he wanted. He's given up a piece to get a queen trade. Well, he could have done stuff like that earlier. And even had more material. So that's black's solution. His solution here has been win pawns, trade everything off, win the ending. But now, as a result of this, suddenly white's got some counterplay. And there's that poor rook sitting there, hasn't moved. And there's black running after more pawns, oblivious to what's going to happen. There's no need for that move. You don't need to win the pawns. What you need to do is watch what white is threatening here, and you'll see it in a moment. Oh my goodness. Okay, well guess what? Black's still winning. And as I said earlier, there's some irony here. What have I been calling for the whole game? For black to develop especially that queen side. The knight was screaming to get out, and it had plenty of opportunities to do so. Even sacrifice itself on c6, as I showed, was winning. Now, what black does is he finally does the one thing I've been suggesting, and it costs him the win. He finally develops the rook. And if you look at the position, white to play and do the best he can. Pause the video. Okay, you've returned. Here it is. Check. And you should have found that. There's no way black can get out of perpetual check. So at the moment that black finally developed his rook, the thing I've been screaming for forever, it cost him the game. And there's an old saying about right rook or wrong rook. In other words, when you have 2 rooks on the same rank and you move one to a file, did you pick the right rook? Well, obviously black didn't pick the right rook. If black plays rook f8, he wins. It's a winning game for black. It's not as easy of a win as it once was because he's only a piece ahead, but he's still winning. White will run out of checks because now king f8, and there's just basically no recourse here. It's going to require a little bit of effort on white's part to win or black's part to win this. You know, you got discovered checks if you want them, but black's winning this. Anyway, lessons in this game: don't grab pawns. Okay, develop. That's the lesson. And I hope this is instructive. I hope this helps everybody that watches, because this is the kind of mistake that happens at this level. And if you're at this rating level, you can take advantage of these people that are making these kind of plays, and your rating will go up, and you'll get tougher opponents, and your chess will improve because the tougher opponents are going to be teaching you things that you'll learn from how they play. So anyway, the game was a draw. Black has himself only to blame. Good job by white for hanging in there. He got his chances, and finally they showed up. I want to thank everyone for looking. Thanks for your time, and I'll be making another video soon. Take care.